Hello, guys. This is Ariel, Noob DM. I'm coming to you from Northern California, and on a beautiful Monday. I guess it's technically a holiday in some areas, some industries. I took day off after having worked the weekend, and I am taking this opportunity to record this video and to share with you some of my favorite supplements. Uh, Continuing on my series dealing with Dungeons and Dragons supplements from every edition. And we've looked at fifth and fourth, and today we're looking at the 3.5 version of D&D, one of my favorite versions of the game, as you probably would surmise from tuning into earlier videos. And today I'm talking about specific supplements for D&D 3.5 that you may want to look into picking up. Some of these are kind of rare, but most of them you can find online or even at like on uh, eBay and other type of other online retailers. Without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these products that were made for 3. To supplement the 3.5 edition of Dungeons and Dragons. All right, guys, here we go. So we start off with enemies and allies. I picked up this supplement for 3.5 at the hobby store in Ukiah, I think, a while back, and um, it is not. I guess I'll start off by saying, but a lot of these supplements or like these booklets were made to to be accessories. You don't necessarily need to get them in order to play the game. You really obviously only need the core books like the Player's Handbook and the Monster Manual and the Dungeon Master's Manual if you're going to run a campaign. But most players will not even need them. It's mostly strictly from DMs and for people that want to supplement their campaigns with different races. And that's one of the things that I think the earlier editions of Dungeons and Dragons did a little bit better than fifth edition, for example. Fifth edition has a lot of campaign books and supplements beyond the core books, but they don't really have, in my opinion, enough books that detail character like more what's the way to expand your like characters and races and classes. So I guess that's they call those character options. So there's a couple of books in fifth edition, Sanitar's Guide I mentioned for the fifth edition version of this supplement series. And there's Tasha's um, the Volos Guide. There's a number of monster compendiums on or monster supplements. So you got your three bestiaries starting with the regular monster manual, and then they also had Volo's Guide to Monsters, and there's a third one, which the name kind of escapes me right now, but there's three of them, and but there's not a lot of supplements or books that will expand on the character options. Like if you want to go beyond what's offered on the player's handbook, how to play your standard cleric or how to how to play your standard fighter. These character options are few in fifth edition. If you only comparatively speaking to second edition, third edition, and previous editions of the game. So specifically for 3.5, they came out with the supplement books to supplement the character options for the races. So they give you different takes or additional options for like the fighter, additional options for the wizards and sorcerers and things like that. And they also gave you books like this, the enemies and allies, which strictly talks about um, the different enemies beyond like your monster. For example, um, the first chapter is all about um, crime, and it talks about your typical thug and pickpocket gangs and your typical burglar and tactics, and also how to role play a lot of these type of character stock characters, non-player characters, NPCs, and it gives you like quite a number of different type of options that you can choose. For example, there's Kalili, he's a non-player character, which is the master of the Thieves Guild, and it tells you what his stats are and what what he's all about, stuff like that. And then there's also the like stuff about religion, like chapter two for on this book, even though it's not specifically based on clerics or religious type characters or characters that gain their powers from the divine sources. Um, this still goes into that. Chapter two talks about religion, and it gives you some way to some options on like druids and some options on like non-player characters that you can interact with in the world and in campaigns, and some tactics on how to combat, how to play combat, or how to engage in combat. I would say, um, and then chapter three goes into mages. So they go into the different classes, but from a non-player character perspective, which is great because you have to have some of these NPCs for your player characters to regularly interact during your campaigns. I mean, yeah, you can make them up, but this makes it easier, or it supplements um, and does some of the work for the DM to bring this type of characters into existence or into an existing campaign. Because, for example, you got Jera of the Skullfire Mages, and that's another thing is like they started doing this in fifth edition with Xanathar and some of the other supplements, but third 3.5 did it first, and I think did it a little bit better in the sense that it talks about the different. Well, I'll be fair; they didn't do it better per se, but they went really in depth into like the different guilds, like the thieves guilds. You've always had like these different organizations that you can that characters can join, and if you pick up the fifth edition adventure, it's kind of like a pre-written adventure about which Xanathar is one of the crime bosses. I mean, he's like a and I've talked about it in this channel before, but it's Xanathar is like he's a monster, um, but he's also a crime lord, which is pretty nice. I mean, pretty cool idea. In the Waterdeep, rather, in the Waterdeep campaign setting, and so one of the few pre-made adventures I actually do own from fifth edition. I have a copy of the one. It takes characters from levels 1 to 5, and it's the one which is set in the Waterdeep campaign, and so they do that where they you can interact with the different NPCs, and it's sort of like a noir mystery type thing, and they do that in this book too, where they present the different NPCs and the different characters. So chapter three is about mages, and uh, chapter four is all about the law, which is excellent. It talks about what a typical city guard does, and if you're a player character but you're not following the laws of a specific town, just like in real life, if you get into trouble with the law, and it tells you how to role play that. So you have your guards and your elite guards, for example. You have a character named Stalis Mon, which is a guard commander, and he gives his tactics and tactics of how to role play him, or how to fight him, or how to engage in combat. But it also gives all his vital stat blocks. So you get the idea. That's basically the book in a nutshell. Oh, and chapter five goes into adventures, which is like a bonus. Basically, it's like okay, you have this great NPCs, you got this great enemies, and you are in your allies that you can, or enemies or allies that you can use in your 3.5 campaign. But here's also a little nugget, a little kind of like guideline for you on how you can use them in specific adventures, which is pretty awesome if you ask me that they did that. And then the book ends with they're very fairly light supplements. I mean, this one runs fairly definitely like under 100 pages, like about 60, 70, 65, 70 pages. But the artwork inside is just really great. I really love the style, and it also gives you um, a lot of guidance. For example, there's an appendix at the end, which is kind of like the one they call it the 1 minute NPC. And sometimes the book says you need an arch villain at a moment's notice, or the player characters decide to research a city, a ruined city they're about to explore. And so there are the following tables can get you started quickly, generating appropriate mastermind villains, patrons, sages, artisans, and minions. So they give you the ways to generate the NPC using this specific the tables. And by the way, that's something that fifth edition has picked up and kind of run with it. Like if you go through some of the 5E supplements, like the ones I've reviewed in this channel, you will quickly see that they take this idea and they ratchet up to like 11. It's just so many tables, anything, including names. You know, it's kind of ridiculous that you don't really have to like come up with a lot of stuff on your own because they have it for you where you can just roll and you can get some of these character options. Then there's also a second appendix which talks about iconic characters, which they're not like fifth edition is set up differently than third edition, where 3.5 specifically has your different, and fourth edition also has your tiers of characters where you have your normal heroes. Going back to like basic, actually, basic did this whole concept where you have your heroes first to 10 level or whatever, and then you have like a more, like a stronger player character, which is beyond the 10th level, and then you have your superhero, like otherworldly PCs that are so up there in level and skill and ability that that they can go up against the gods and go up against more um, dangerous and more challenging type of monsters and adversaries. So I really like this supplement. If you can pick it up cheap anywhere. Enemies and allies is definitely one of the ones that I recommend for 3.5. Okay, guys. The other supplement for 3.5 that I wanted to discuss with you guys is the Defenders of the Faith, which is a guidebook to clerics and paladins. Um, I I have been playing clerics and paladins all along. In fifth edition, I just recently started a campaign um, where I did roll up a well. Our group is kind of weird because we have kind of like revolving DMs at the time, and so some of them were having to make have the players make a character every single time, which was a little bit annoying. But I started with the cleric, and then I picked up some spell supplements, and then I recently I've been playing a paladin, which is kind of fun too. And fifth edition has this spell cards, which are kind of nice. So they kind of, you know, you can look at you don't have to flip through the book to actually see what kind of spells you have prepared. But in 3.5 we have I picked up this Defenders of the Faith guidebook at a hobby store in Houston, and I looked at it for like $1 or so. It was like in the discounted rack, and I was like, "What's this?" And I looked through it. I didn't even know that they had made this accessory type books for 3.5, but I was flipping through it, and I really liked the artwork inside because it has that clean black and white artwork that's kind of reminiscent to like the old D&D books from first edition, but it has its own style. If you go flip through the pages of the third edition 3.5 core books like the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook and Monster Manual, you know what I mean. The artwork is all pretty much standardized and it looks really nice. But this particular supplement is, of course, all about the clerics and the paladins, the faith or the divine type casters, character classes. Well, we used to call them in AD&D second edition. They kind of like broke it down to like wizards were one type. I talked about this before, where you had the wizards, but then the clerics were classified as priests, the priest classes. So the priest classes were like um, clerics and the druids. But this book is all about um, the defenders of the faith, which are the clerics primarily, and the paladins. And It goes really into detail about stuff like armor and special mounts, which were like if you're mounting a horse, you're on horseback, or you're on any type of a wolf or whatever type of creature, then it tells you how those mechanics work. There's also the channeling. According to the player's handbook for 3.5, a cleric can make a turning check to accomplish effects other than turning or rebuking the undead. Some other possible uses for positive or negative energy include warding a sanctuary or sealing a portal. And it goes into that divine intervention. And and some new craft and possession skills, divine feats, new feats for 3.5. Feats were like a big deal in 3.5. There still kind of are around, but in fifth edition, it's sort of like an extra power, or the DM will grant you like a feat every level, or depending on your class, you get a feat depending on your level and depending on what's happening in the campaign. But they're not as big or as robust robust or as complete, I would say, as they were back in the day, the 3.5 days. The 3.5, they really harped on skills and feats. And so this gives you like new feats for your divine casters. And it's got a whole section on sacred gear, because clerics and paladins use certain type of equipment that are not typically carried or owned by members of other classes, and it details what those are and how to incorporate them into the campaign. And then there's a whole section on magic items, of course, armor and shield descriptions, the special shields, and because clerics can wear armor. They can't wear like really heavy armor in 3.5, or I think the 5.5e and other editions of D&D, but they definitely are warriors, and they can wear shields, so armor rather, and carry shields and some weapons. And so it talks about that, the specific weapon descriptions that they have access to. And then there's the second. That's just in the first chapter of the book. This one is a little bit thicker than the allies, because the allies is just for your NPCs that you're going to encounter during campaigns. But this is like almost 100 pages of supplementary material for the clerics and for the paladins. Chapter 2 goes all into the churches and organizations, and how the role of what the role of the churches are, the church structure, church support, and then it kind of veers into alignment, because, of course, in 3.5 and early editions of D&D, mostly all editions of D&D, really, the paladins and the clerics tend to be of a lawful good or neutral good. And they're basically a good alignment. So you can have an evil cleric, but it's not really the norm. Um, you can have a chaotic good one, but most tend to be on the lawful side, or kind of neutral in terms of um, chaotic. Actually, I take it back. In 3.5, there you would see your chaotic evil characters. They're just not as prevalent. Most people play like a lawful character. So there's that. Um, and it talks about the different organizations, like the Order of the Chalice. you know the player characters can join the different organizations in the game, like the Stargazers, um, and different type of temples that are available. So it really goes into a whole range of detail and in-depth description. And then the third chapter of the book talks about prestige classes. They were introduced in the Dungeon Master's Guide for 3.5, and prestige classes are like character classes that the player characters must qualify before actually taking. So you can't just roll up a class without some requirements. And the requirements for entry, they're detailed in each of the prestige class section. But basically, they're usually like more detailed and more supplementing what's on the player's handbook. For example, this book details the Church Inquisitor, um, and what they do and what their stats are. There's also a consecrated harrier, um, things like that. It really goes into the different type of prestige classes and what the requirements are, what the stats are, what the skills are, stuff like that. For both paladins and for the clerics. I really like the Hunter of the Dead. The Hunter of the Dead is the hated enemy of all the undead. So basically, they did carry this over into fifth edition. I know that for Ranger, for example, one of the Ranger options in one of the supplements, I think it's Xanadar, where you can pick a monster slayer and you're sort of kind of specialized as a Ranger in the type of monster that you want to slay. It's a kind of the same idea. Here we have for the prestige classes for the the paladins. You can be a hunter of the dead. I think it's a paladin prestige class. Hunter of the dead is the hated enemy of all the undead. The hunter of the dead possesses many tools to fight against such creatures. So you get some base attack, your regular base attack bonus, but then you'll get some bonuses to your fortitude, reflex, and will, which are the three main stats in 3.5 in terms of defense. And so it talks about what the stats are, what the bonuses are, what the requirements are, things of that nature. So what else is in there? I haven't looked at this, but this is a great supplement. The artwork is just phenomenal. I really love the simple stylistic style that they use in some of these uh, books. The War Priest is another one that's really cool. Prestige classes detailed in chapter 5 of this book. And then chapter 4 is all about divine magic. So it goes into like divine spells for clerics, for paladins, and for druids, rangers, really any spellcaster that class that uses divine magic will benefit from new spells and from spell descriptions that are supplemented in this book. So that's mostly what the last chapter about is about. Chapter 4 really broken down into 4 chapters. Chapter 4 is all about divine magic and just a list of more spells, additional spells than what's listed in the player's handbook. Um, and then it has an appendix of monster clerics or monster clerics. Um, so appendix in the back, monsters, clerics. Virtually all the more intelligent species have deities, and many of these deities have clerics. So the monster manual lists deity and domain information for many types of non-human clerics, and this is summarized in these tables. So um, you got a table that just talks about which deities or which are the gods that the monsters actually worship, or some of the monsters that do worship gods, um, like elemental lords and the dragon deities. So the dragons, depending on their alignment, will worship, chaotic dragons, good dragons, evil dragons. It's the whole shebang. So it's a fantastic supplement for 3.5 if you're going to play a cleric or if you're going to play any divine, especially clerics and paladins. But there are, like I talked about, spells for any divine type class, including druids. So it's a great supplement. I do have another one called the picked up one at the hobby shop recently called Tome and Blood, and that's more of a guidebook to wizards and sorcerers. I'm not as familiar with that one because I don't really play wizards that much, but I imagine it's the flipping through it. It's kind of the same idea where they just have more information on the different type of wizards, and it adds to their spells, and it adds to their lore, and it adds to it even has a really cool location for a mage's abode, um, which is you know a house or a structure for mages, and then it goes into feats and prestige classes as well. So the formats for these books are all the same, and they have them for most of the classes. I personally find them to be my favorite 3.5 supplement, or one of my favorite 3.5 supplements. Um, Defenders of the Faith for the spell casting clerics and paladins, Tome and Blood for wizards and sorcerers, which I admit I haven't used as much, but I do. I do own it, and I am familiar with the format being specifically the same as the other books, and also the enemies and allies, which I talked about earlier in the video, which just gives you a wide range of NPCs that you can throw or at your players, and they can associate with an idea that has been around forever, and ever since the early editions of the games. But this 3.5 supplements just do a bang up job of incorporating that. Um, Yeah, so those are the 3.5 supplements that I like, that I own, that I've actually read through and used. I don't know if you there are many others, but that's what I wanted to highlight. So I hope that you enjoyed this trip down memory lane back to 3.5 and some of the supplements for 3.5. Next video, I think we're going to focus on the supplements for AD&D. We're going back to AD&D second edition, and I'll tell you about some of the. That's going to be a tough one because there's some really good supplements that I do own or I do know about. There's just so many for second edition that you could probably do like a whole hour or like an entire series on just the supplements. But I'll try to narrow it down and pick a few good ones, or some of the ones that I think are really good and really worth picking up in the back market. So that's all I've got for today. Thank you for tuning into the channel. And if you like this type of content, don't forget to always give us a like, give the channel a like, or subscribe so that we can continue to grow and I can continue to make more videos about Dungeons and Dragons for you guys. Have a great day.